Hello, good morning. My name is Dr. Faida Zitouni. Most of you have seen me before. So I am chairing this session, the first session of today. And our first speaker is Dr. Nabil Al-Tawil. Dr. Nabil Al-Tawil is a civil engineer. He obtained his master and doctorate degree in construction management from Loughborough University and Reading. I am a graduate from Loughborough University, so we must have met at some stage. In addition to his academic role as an associate professor of project management at Baghdad University of Technology, Dr. Nabil became involved professionally with the construction field, working with consultant and contracted in Iraq, Lebanon, Canada, and later in the UAE. Dr. Nabil is currently working with HKA, formerly Hill International, in connection with alternative dispute resolution, giving advice to Abu Dhabi government in addition to arbitrary and claim advisory. I leave it with you, and please, you can start your first. I just close it.
Yes, the paper is related to claims. In general, claims is very much associated with contract, and contract is I just want to go through the historical background about contract, which is the basis for all claim on dispute resolutions. The first thing I want to expand on is the first contract ever discovered was created by the Chaldeans in Uruk. That's Ur al-Nasriya in Iraq. And the culture of that civilization, in fact, expands from Iraq until Qatar, in that sense. And would be probably either to use my laptop instead of that one. It is the right one, but I wanted, because I'm going to switch to some photographs from illustration. Now this is, it's all right, let's start here. So we are going to start with contract development. I'm going to touch on the whole paper is related to construction claim in the Gulf region. I'm going to discuss the causes, the recommendation, and lesson learned. The causes is detailed in my written paper that is distributed to you. I'm going to touch, because of the time limitation, I'm going to touch on the experiment that we have done in the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi about what we call it the claims committee. The claim committee is related to some arrangement that has been done throughout the last 30 years in Abu Dhabi, where our firm, which used to be called Hill International, was appointed by the government of Abu Dhabi to be the consultant to advise on all claims submitted to the government of Abu Dhabi during the last 30 years. Is there any way we can connect this?
Yeah, we can change for you from there. Can you change the next one, please?
Yeah. So before getting into that, I want to touch on historical background about the first ever contract that was used. Can you click the other one? Yeah, all right. So these, the bullets, these are the round like ball, an empty ball inside, and this is written in cuneiform. Cuneiform is the special language of the Chaldeans that was even before the Chaldean on all nations that was in Mesopotamia there. In Arabic it's called Al-Kitab al-Mismariya. This is written where this was found, although it was found much longer than this. No, it's this one. It is there. No, just before that. These were found by a German archaeologist in 1929, but nobody knew what does it mean. It was not until 1970 when a French archaeologist called Denise, she deciphered this language, and then she found out that these are probably proved to be the first written contract in the world. In the outside of this bullets, the ball, there's written the names of both parties and the amount to be paid. And inside this, there is a tablet inside the bulla where details of the responsibility and the obligation of each party are written in details in there. This was only, as you can see at the bottom, this was only announced very recently, in fact, a few months back in 2017, in a program by the BBC World Service, as you can see inside. This is the very first written contract in the world, which originated from this particular area, in this region. That was 5,000 years back. Now let's go into the following page, please. Yes, no, this is all right. This is the first contract done in the United Arab Emirates. Probably I give you, this is for those of you who read English, they can read the English part. It is only one-page contract signed by Sheikh Shakhbout, the late Sheikh Shakhbout. He is the head of state in the United Arab Emirates, in Abu Dhabi, before Sheikh Zayed. He is his brother. He signed it with somebody from Cancelled, which is now, they've been bought by ACOM. ACOM is very well-known big consultant here. And this consultant to do the design and project management for two big projects, which is Abu Dhabi International Airport, which is now still the existing one. Before now there is a development in the new one. And there is Al-Maqta' Bridge. Al-Maqta' Bridge, you know, Abu Dhabi is an island. Al-Maqta' Bridge is the island between the mainland and Abu Dhabi itself. This is the Maqta' Bridge. It still exists, still used. And all it says is that there is a contract between the two parties, and the fees is 5% from actual cost. For those of you who probably would like to have...
Next.
No, just because this is very important. This is where it all started.
Maybe you won't have the same photos.
I see, you don't have it there. Never mind. Yeah. This is the contractual development in the Emirates of Abu Dhabi, where it started. The first contract was, as we said, in 1965, which is the one-page contract for two huge contracts, where no detail, no obligation, no responsibility is written in there. Only the name of the parties, the name of the project, and some description about the fees that is expected to be paid at the end of the day. And then we moved on from this into other development, other cases where is it here? Yeah. ايه لا ما مربوط بس مو انا ما بدي اشوفها ايه. So these are the assessment of, in general now, we are talking about here about the contract that was forged between the government of Abu Dhabi and Hill International to become their advisors. So anybody has any claim against any government entity, he goes there instead of going to arbitration or litigation, which normally costs a lot and takes very, very long time, very costly for contractors. Sheikh Zayed himself instructed, let's have a committee to consider and check and study the merits and the entitlement for contractors. And we worked through that, and then if we go to the other one, to identify the causes, I have selected a sample of something like 248 case claim to study the causes for these and what are the claim head for the claims. This histogram, it goes from 1987 when it all started until the 2016 is the last one. Can we have the other one? Normally, 18.4% of the amount claimed is awarded. This should give you an idea about what sort of entitlement in general. There is ups and downs, of course. And then to identify the causes, the claim head is at the bottom. Where is, no, how can we, here, no, come back. You see, there is, these are the claim heads, no. Yeah, no, keep it. These are the claim heads, which is different from one another. It starts with payment delay, guarantees, prolongation, escalation, deductions, and delay damages, and all the rest. Now, if you move to the other one.
Next.
Now,
Next slide.
next. This pie chart gives you an idea about the first one to the left is about the claim amount. What does each of these claim head represent from the total sample studied? And I am talking about this sample represent 30 years. It is not really a sample that you are measuring only 1 or 2 years. This is 30 years, a very representative sample, and it gives you the percentages of the claim in there. And this is the one on the right is the awarded. So you can easily tell the difference between the two.
Next. Next slide.
Do we have, yes?
Got 1 more minute.
All right. Now I am going through the causes of claim. I've divided the causes of claim. All this is written in your in the text that you have. We have divided into pre-tendering, pre-tender stage and post-tendering stage and during construction and there. All the list is there. I don't really have the time to go through it. I just want to give you a little 1 or 2 examples only about it. This is the flow chart of this experiment, which is really excellent. It saved contractor and government agency a lot of money and time to resolve their dispute. Instead, as I said, instead of taking a number of years to solve anything, this is, no, you can't see it.
That's it. Is it the last one?
Yeah, I think we can. These are additional things that I wanted to show, but unfortunately.
Anytime I see presentation of research on the causes of claims, there's always an element of bias. You know, the client thinks it's the consultant's fault, the consultant thinks it's the client's fault or the contractor's fault. So it's interesting to see the actual claims which were allocated. Was this by a judge, or who decided? Was there a difference between what the claimant thought was the cause of the claim and what the actual cause of the claim was? Because I think if you have the actual judgment made, you can make a better, unbiased decision about why the claim arose. Did you find any difference between what the people said was the cause of the claim and what the judge decided was the causes of the claim?
To answer your question, I'm going to answer it very quickly. The answer for this in the percentage that I showed at the beginning, that 18.4% of the value of the claims are valid and he is entitled to it. The rest, either exaggerated or unsubstantiated, or he did not really submit any evidence to support the entitlement.
Yeah.
But to elaborate on the answer here, the claims committee that I'm talking about is that when a claimant, that is a contractor, presumably, or a consultant for that sake, he submit any claim, this will be studied by professional, impartially and neutrally. And sometimes we call him third-party neutral in there. So he works, and he have the support of the government. In fact, we've been instructed to be fair to the contractors. Sheikh Zayed himself at the time, he said, all contractors are local people. We don't want to penalize them, but we want to support them and encourage them and give them what they rightly deserve. And this is the whole idea of sitting there with a team of professionals to work on. I just give you a little example on this. We have dealt with claims as little as something like 300,000 dirhams. And one of the last one that we dealt with was 1.8 billion dirhams. And for this 1.8 billion, we recommended the payment of 930 million dirhams for it, which was only paid about a month ago. And this is a very, very substantial amount, and no contractor would have dreamt that he would be able to get it if he go to litigation or to arbitration. It was fair, and it was sort of right in the middle, no bias, no impartiality.
Thank you for the presentation. We have the reasons, but my question is, did any measures took place in United Arab Emirates in regulating or managing the contracts in better way to reduce, these claims?
There's always measure. It evolves. There is development in the system. Unfortunately, the time limit is very, very small. I did not really pass through the first, when I said contractual development, we started from one-page contract until now we are using the FIDIC. And even the FIDIC is not really, it have a lot of discrepancy, it have a lot of problem, it have deficiencies that whenever you have, the problem arises in the last 10 years when there was a problem with the economic meltdown and prices went down suddenly, and there was an issue with contractors. This is a good example when they introduce a formula for price escalation, and this is a good example for it.
Thank you so much. So I would like to introduce for us our second speaker, Professor Sharif Mohammed. Professor Sharif Mohammed, he is professional construction project manager. He is actively engaged in scholarly research focusing on the development of theoretical knowledge and operational tools needed for effective implementation and evaluation of process improvement initiatives. He has supervised more than 20 PhD students, and he is addressing topics related to project management and construction safety. He is also serving associate editor on Journal of Safety Science. Please, would you like to start?
Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction. And I promise you that I will stick to the 15 minutes presentation. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my humble presentation, which is basically not just about the paper that's included in the proceedings. It's about my own personal thoughts about safety and construction safety in particular, and the work that I'm doing with my PhD students. And hopefully that will lead to some of the, or sharing some of the research work that we are doing in that space. I have to acknowledge my co-author, one of my PhD students, Mr. Hassan El-Idrisi. So the title is Leadership Effectiveness in the Context of Construction Safety, with a focus on the term or the verb influence. Traditionally, whether you are in construction or not, safety has been based on what I call the 4 E's. So since the Industrial Revolutions till now, The way we look at safety is basically start with the environment within which we operate, identifying the hazard. Then we engineer the workplace by saying that this is how you reduce the risk to yourself and your co-workers. And then we start educating people through training, systems, etc. And then we enforce it. So in simple English, if you like, I can transfer these 4 E's into the following. That if you follow the standards, if you pay attention to what we say and while you are doing it, and you don't make mistakes, you don't go outside the boundaries, then hopefully things will be safe. In my own view, that doesn't work. Or at least it worked at the time of the Industrial Revolution. With the complexity that we operate within nowadays, it's a very simplistic way of looking at safety. I respect standards, but I understand that those who are implementing standards need to understand what they can do with these standards. So let's look at the construction industry, not in a particular country. What construction industry does, it gathers information about incidents, accidents, and they look at the safety performance as reflected by those statistics, and they claim that safety has improved simply because the number of incidents or accidents or fatalities have been dropping over the last few years. Whether you're showing it over a 5-year period, 30-year period, that chart is pretty classic. Okay, the horizontal axis is time, the y-axis is basically whatever you are measuring, but it's a classic, and someone will stand there and say, look, we have improved since the new initiative, blah, blah, blah. What is wrong in this is that first you are assuming that the number of employees, number of projects, etc., are the same, which is not true. Second is that what do you do with that bit at the end there, the tail, the plateau? Does that become the industry norm? Like, if we are too equally, performing badly, does that mean that everybody would accept that this has to be part of the system? My answer is no. What we are getting today is because of compliance. Compliance is a good thing, but take you only that far. It will never, ever help you to reduce this to the bottom, where you're actually hoping to achieve. I'm not a big fan myself of something called zero accident. So if you are advocate of that, please accept my apologies. But the point here I'm trying to raise is that compliance does not drive change. And that's what we need to do, because if you keep doing what you have been doing, don't expect different results. You will always have this number of whatever accident or incident towards the end that doesn't really change much. So that's the early thoughts on safety. Current thoughts of safety, which I want to share with you, and I know it might not be everybody cups of tea because it's a bit challenging. I don't believe in compliance. I believe that the systems that we operate within are too complex nowadays and dynamics because they have multiple goals, conflicting objectives, multiple interacting parties, complex social structures. We subcontract in Australia, where I come from, 95% of the work. So at any stage, you'll find too many subcontractors working on site. Complex technologies, as we saw this morning and yesterday's presentation. In a nutshell, the word complex keeps coming up and up. So what's happening here, we're still using standards. The standards do not really match the advancement in technology, nor the advancement of current practice. So in this case, we have 3 research teams that I'm very honored to lead and work with. One looks at these complex interactions in terms of how humans interactions, human equipment interactions, different hierarchical nature of the site, work together in safety. The other one looks at better way of risk assessment. Okay, and the third one, which is the topic that we're doing today, or covering today, is basically looking at how safety improvements should come from organization by understanding the gap between what the procedures say and actual practice. So Traditionally, as I said, we found our comfort in controlling by saying this is our system that controls everything. And then we get surprised that it doesn't allow us to evolve in terms of how actually we can transfer and interpret what the standards is all about into practice. We believe that everything could be, if it's controlled, it will be predictable, but actually they're not. Our systems are too rigid, and you need to be flexible and creative and offer alternatives for people who are on the side to make the right decision. Now, that's where leadership comes into it. And that's, I guess, the topic of my talk. So basically, the age-old question is, what is leadership? There are too many definitions. The one I picked up for this study is basically that to take people to places they wouldn't have gone and have them to do things that they wouldn't have done because it is their own idea. And that's contradictory with everything to do with standards. Standards I comply with because someone's told me to do so. But when you talk about real leadership, not in terms of title, that I'm the site manager, I'm the superintendent, I'm whatever, so therefore I'm a leader. No, this is not about site leadership. This even could be applicable to the CEO in the context of safety. So the key word that I want to focus here is that it is their own idea. They will tell me, you know what, the standard says this, but given that we have this, and those who develop the standard have no idea what about it, I can do it this way. What do you think? So safety leadership in that context is to have people demonstrate both safety compliance, which, by the way, this is a threshold. Anything below that, you shouldn't be in practice. But what I'm aiming for is what's beyond compliance. It's initiatives. It's a process whereby the individual, at any level, whether the CEO or the superintendent, can influence those who are working with. Now, you all agree with me, and hope, that leaders have a tremendous impact in the field by what they say, do, and more importantly, don't say or don't do. Okay, so it's very easy to say, well, we are committed to safety. We're very easy to say, you know, safety is priority number one. But you know what? That doesn't take you that far. Why? Because we are moving towards complex way of handling things in construction. So rather than just having commitment, you have a better engagement. Rather than having safety number one priority, it should be integral in every part of the business, even if you're doing an accounting job. Rather than just safe behavior is encouraged, well, how do you reward that? That's my question and people question on the site. Rather than looking at incident action rate, what are the proactive measures that you should be looking at? So in a nutshell, there is no leader who's neutral. It's either a good leader or a bad leader. And the good leader is not about applying the standards. It's implementing the standard. A good leader is to question the standards and encourage people to come forward and challenge this in a way that's more productive, not challenges just for the sake of challenging it. So what makes a good safety leader? It's all in the literature. We talk all this out, and we try to focus on the word influence by looking at a very simple study framework that my student came up with. This looks at the competencies, not the skills, it's the competencies that you need in practice and how they impact the leadership behavior. Behavior means something that is visually seen by others, as well as how that affects safety performance. So I want you, my friends, here to look at the middle one, which is leadership behavior. Leadership behavior, again, if you go into the literature, you will find heaps of things that can reflect what leadership behavior is. I cannot handle all that. So we've grouped them into 4 areas, right? Workforce involvement at all levels, relationship management, upward and downward and sideways, visibility and leading by example, and more importantly, the proactive management in the context of safety. So that's what basically is the heart of the conceptual framework. On the other hand, if you look at, so these are the 4 I've just mentioned. On the other hand, the one on the left-hand side, which is basically the competencies, there are a few of them there. There are competencies that are based on what we call the theory of job performance, which emotional, social, and cognitive. Different competencies that every manager should demonstrate. And there's those ones who are based on the function of leadership, which, well, there are some, commonalities there. However, this is where I guess the heart of the presentation, which is how do leaders influence others? In other words, how do they can utilize the environment for influencing others, and how they recognize that followers can be influenced? So as you can see, there are 3 sets of competencies. I could be very good at one, but not good at on the other two, or whatever. So this combination of competencies that we are putting to the test, the empirical test here, to see whether those competencies individually and in combination positively impact the safety leadership behavior that people can see, and then how that reflects the performance. So in the paper, I talk about the constructive operationalization and all that. I don't want to bother with all of this because of time limitations, but basically we applied this in two places. The one I'm reporting on today is in Saudi Arabia, the other one in Australia. And we are looking at whether we can test this hypothesis that if you can demonstrate these competencies individually and in combination can impact safety performance indirectly through the safety leadership behavior. The paper, as you will read if you are interested, you'll find that there are a number of positive relationships there that are statistically significant. But to be honest with you, that's not the exciting part of the work. The exciting part of the work, which is now my students is working on, is that now you know that there is such a relationship. What you're going to do about the behavior. The behavior is something that you can see, but you cannot explain why they're doing that. So whether an individual or a group of people working together, there must be a way that they have processed that complexity of the situation and took that action that made sense at that time. You and I are not in a position to judge that. However, we are responsible as leaders to understand how they came to the conclusion that that makes sense. So the true leader needs to understand why it made sense for this individual to feel so relaxed like this, or for this group of people to take such risk. And then from there, what sort of behavioral changes that I have to demonstrate to introduce to my team so that they can reduce the likelihood of repeating this. There is no standards will cover this. And I don't think anyone who's involved in developing standards will really think of that. So I'm more than happy. Thank you for your attention. And I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have on this short presentation. Thank you.
I actually agree with everything you say, yes. The zero harm and zero accidents is a distraction.
That's right.
I was once asked by the, sorry, it's not about me, it's about you, but I'll just mention this one thing.
No, go for it.
I was once asked by the UK HSE to investigate if accidents are known as asymptotic, which means that the trend line will never reach zero. And I turned it down. I said, do not commission this research, because the trade unions will have your head in a vice. So I told HSE in the UK not to pursue this. But you know, it's kind of true. You always have uncertainty, and I agree that the prescriptive, you can never write a safety method statement to cover every eventuality. So you need to rely more and more on the competency of your workforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One question then, it's very statistical analysis with regression analysis, which if you have enough numbers, you can always prove statistically correct. But did you do any qualitative interviews or anything was there any interesting came from that?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. We did the qualitative analysis and a method of triangulation, if you like, but in the Australian part of the study, not the Saudi ones. It's very difficult to do that in the Saudi ones, to be honest with you. But the Australian one, yes. And basically, it's, I guess one of the points that were raised by many people who were interviewed, there is nothing called leadership in that context. It's called managerial leadership. I don't believe in that something that managers do this, leaders do that. In the modern era, it's about managerial leadership. The second thing that came up is that there is external factors that our study is not or hasn't catered for that might affect the performance of individuals. Okay, but that's the thing that came up very strongly from including the unions and other things that I don't want to get. We have very strong unions in Australia, you might know. So, but thank you for the contribution. I'm glad that's
Just a comment. Because you see, I get actually a little bit annoyed when I see people are talking about leadership when they are actually talking about management skills. Because leadership in theory is not always related to managers. You can have a leader who is not a manager, and he is actually leading and taking the championship of. So I was going to just ask about this, and your last comment was just spot on. So any details about what, can you elaborate further on this, please?
I think if there is a title called team leader, or he or she becomes leader, I guess they need to understand that when they delegate stuff to managers is not just managers. They will empower them to demonstrate leadership skills within their sphere of influence. That's where you have future leaders.
Correct.
You see what I mean? Leaders is about behavior, it's about skills, about implementation. So, irrespective of the title, irrespective of the responsibility, irrespective of the, so that's something that I think many people believe that leadership is power and they keep it for it shouldn't be. You will become a leader by actually investing in future leaders because they will help you to do a better job.
And need to be empowered.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We just take the last question.
Sure.
It's very interesting.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you very much for that magnetic delivery. And my question is this. You see, the concept of leadership, just like you have stated, is quite omnibus. It's very nebulous. Now, are you looking at any particular type of leadership or leadership possible?
Yes.
Because, right.
I do apologize if this comes as a strong, but I'm known for, saying what I believe. I don't believe in things like transactional or transformational leadership. That's again very much 60s and the 70s, last century stuff. Nowadays, it's all about adaptive leadership. And that's what it's all about. Adaptive and flexible leadership, ethical leadership. You do what is right because you see it that way. It's not because you're following rules. Adaptive leadership means you are working within a system to make the best of that system. You don't have to transform anything. You don't have to, do you see what I mean? So that's what we call contemporary leadership, not the classic leadership, which is either you transform the group or to look at the followers and skills. Somehow these two extreme categorization, I think it's well overdue. It's well sort of outdated. What is nowadays is about adaptive leadership, flexible leadership.
You can call it as responsible leaders.
Absolutely. And add to that ethical leadership and all that. This is a new contemporary way of looking at leadership.
Thank you so much.
One more, please.
I'm just actually have concerns about when you actually as a leader, you're taking decisions which actually may not comply with the standards, you're going to be legally liable for that. How we can create a legal framework for the leaders that can actually judge and make decisions out of the standards without actually being liable for any.
There are two answers to this one. There is a diplomatic answer, and there is what I believe in. Which one do you want? The diplomatic answer is that the standard needs to be upheld, and you have to do whatever that's extra. That's the diplomatic one. I don't like that. The reality of what I believe in is that the standards are there for a reason. And if I can achieve the objective and exceed that in the most efficient way, that's time efficiency, cost efficiency, whatever, the system should be resilient enough, and I know that's to absorb that, to adapt to that, provided that I achieve my objectives. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yes, absolutely.
Safety is like 0 and 1, black and white. Resilience is about building a buffer that you can have different shades of gray. And the true leader, in any position, it doesn't have to be safety. We need to understand that the system should be resilient to absorb that based on the adaptation of the technology, system complexity, without.
Do you mean the systems? Do you mean the legal system?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, I saw my collection on that one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The topic I'm going to present today is a teamwork. This is a research based in Saudi Arabia. I'm going to present our findings and how we went about it. Just before I start, a raise of hands in terms of how many people know what is knowledge management, or at least heard about it. Oh, okay, thanks very much. The reason I ask this is because I need to set the context as to what is managing knowledge. So in terms of knowledge, here we're looking into two types of knowledge. One is the tacit knowledge, it's called, which is held in people's brains, and it's very difficult to code it or write it down. And it is usually, it comes through dialogues or mentorship or apprenticeship. But when you're talking about explicit knowledge, if they say, how about, what are the key features of varying cuisine? You can quickly write it down. But when you talk about the taste, it depends on each one taste buds. So that's where it's the knowledge comes from. In this title, we are looking for keywords like what is the challenge of managing such knowledge in the context of the construction industry. So we've heard our keynote speaker talking about the dynamics of the construction industry, how fragmented it is, the number of stakeholders that the construction industry deals with. So in that context, we're going to look into the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So just to put forth the expectation, what I'm going to do in the next 10 minutes, talk about the rationale as to why knowledge management in Saudi Arabia. And then I'll talk to you all about what is the research aim and what exactly did we do in the ground to collect data, and when data was collected, how was it analyzed, and what were the findings. So going through the things, as we saw in the last 2 days, much emphasis was on the vision of the GCC and where Bahrain stands. So in terms of Saudi Arabia, they're also looking into knowledge economy and their Vision 2030. So my question is, when they're looking into vision at that strategic level, what is actually happening at the industrial level and what's happening at the organization level is what's been looked into. And without a shadow of doubt, in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the construction industry is very next to the oil and gas industry. So it does contribute to the GDP of the economy, and around 20% of that is done. So in terms of managing knowledge, well, it's nothing new. You say, yeah, we've been managing, we've been getting our profits. So why should we do knowledge management? And the argument is, yes, you've been doing, but the era now is you're looking into a complex process. It's the globalized world. You're getting experts across the world making decisions, working together, and how are you going to work together without managing their knowledge and their expectations? So what, in the literature, a lot of it has been written, but mostly in the Western countries. There's very less if you look into the MENA region especially. So what is knowledge management and where does it stand in terms of the Saudi Arabia construction industry? So our aim was to understand the ground reality. So what is their understanding of knowledge management, and are they implementing anything? Because in Saudi Arabia there are multinational companies as well, so there could be possibilities of getting the Western best practices into the country's construction industry. So this was an exploratory study. So we came out with research questions. So we've got this economy that is looking into knowledge era. Yeah, that's fine. So that's kind of the key driver, but what actually makes them to drive this? And as you saw from the presentation from the keynote speaker regarding BIM, they are interested in the bottom line. How much can we save? How much can we do business for the future? So knowledge management has got a role in it. And to do that, what are the initiatives? So once you have the initiatives, there are challenges. So what are the challenges embedded? And once you've got a culture in place to embed knowledge management, what impact? It's the outcome. Yeah? Clients drive the industry, they invest in the project, so what are they getting? And because knowledge management, by the nature of it, it's very sticky, it's very difficult to quantify because it depends from person to person. So what would be their KPIs? And in doing so, can we come up with a framework? So, these are the holistic view of the research. But in this paper, I'm just talking about the challenges. So what did we do? Yes, we looked into the literature review, did a very comprehensive one, and from there, we thought the best approach was qualitative methodology. The reason being is, as I said, not much is done in terms of knowledge management, and we need to go into the depth of the subject area. So we conducted 46 interviews. As Sharif was saying, it's not easy to do these interviews and negotiate the access, their participation, and it was done with 30 construction organizations. And I must emphasize, these are large construction organizations, where I mean more than 500 employees. It was done in semi-structured interviews. It ranged between 30 to 90 minutes because you get engrossed in the details. And these were what I would call the leaders who were leading their teams in those organizations in terms of the project management aspect. Once the data was collected, obviously in today's day you can record it through a smartphone and then download it digitally with the audio files. And then we took it to NVivo. It's a qualitative software which analyzes text. And we did the codings, we got the themes, and the unit of analysis here is because we're looking at the individual person as a professional who's representing the organization, and these organizations are representing the industry. So the industry then gets fed into the economy of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and that's the unit of assessment. Running through the findings, it was interesting to see that capturing tacit knowledge, people said 91%. So how did we get this 91%? As I said, through the NVivo and all those analysis. So out of 46 professionals, 91% said capturing tacit knowledge. So why did they say that? Is what I'm going to go in detail in the next few slides. Managing stakeholders' knowledge. So there are multiple stakeholders in the construction industry, and how do you manage their expectations and their knowledge in that process of knowledge management? Looked into cultural issues, the leadership support, organizational infrastructure issues. So going on, 42 interviewees out of the 46 stated that managing tacit knowledge was a challenge. And a quote here says, certainly we cannot do business without knowing the specific knowledge related to BIM initiative. And this was spot on as to what came out in today's morning keynote speaker. And that is where it lies. Knowledge related to BIM initiative resides in our stakeholders. Yeah? From the clients, from the designers, from civil engineers, QSs, all the professionals, they've got their own process, their own knowledge of the industry. But how much of that is there out for sharing or for transferring? Very little. And it's in the employee's head. So at the moment, they don't have any way of managing it. To break that down, yes, it is problematic, and how could you go about it? First step is mapping and then capturing. And there were some constraints mentioned. Next one is managing stakeholders' knowledge, and again, capturing and sharing knowledge came out within that. Cultural issues, it was diverse, and in some cultures, if you just suggest them to do something better, they feel offended. It's not taken something positive as a learning, okay? So, and in some cultures, they say, why should I share my knowledge? Do you mean that I'm going to go out of job? So how do you balance that concept of dichotomy of knowledge management? Leadership support, much has been discussed by our previous presenter about leadership, and in my view, I look into leadership at 3 levels. in the construction industry, it just starts from the site level, project level, and at the organizational level. At every level, you have to demonstrate those, and how in the context of knowledge management. How is the tacit knowledge managed? How is the explicit knowledge? In doing so, you do need the support from the top, from the organization. What is in place to do that? In conclusion, yes, this is something that countries are starting to recognize as a knowledge is an important aspect of the economy, and they've got the vision documents where knowledge is the key word, but it is to develop the systematic way and to have systems in place to facilitate both explicit and tacit knowledge. So we are working forward in coming up with the framework which the construction organizations will validate it and take that up. Thanks for your time.
Well, thanks for a very interesting presentation. And actually, I want to touch on two things. You referred to them as part of the challenges, and also you referred to another thing, which is the retention of knowledge. And my question to you, the difference between knowledge management and building capacity. Because there are some issues that, when you lose an employee, you need to get someone in training. And this is perhaps, from my point of view, is this slightly different than the knowledge management and knowledge management system. But the second part of the question is about the retention of knowledge. I've been serving in Dubai for a number of years. This is primarily an expat community. This is a fatal aspect because you lose your job, you get your life seriously distracted. You need to leave the country, you need to, it's not like losing a job if you're back home, to me in Canada or someone in the UK or whatever. That's a fatal thing. So this is perhaps a situational or a locational dimension that perhaps not every knowledge management system can address. How your comments on that?
Exactly. You're talking about two aspects here, and going back to what I would call it the organizational infrastructure aspect. So at an organization level, what are the aspects that can be done in order to retain the knowledge when people leave the organization? And it could be due to various reasons, economy downturn, external and internal. So, for example, in large organizations based in the UK, they've got what is called as mentoring system. So once you hand in your resignation, saying that you're leaving, there's a period of time that has to be given notice as per their contract. So
is it effective?
Yes, yes. So they start putting people in place. But having said that, not every organization follows that. So that is where the leadership support comes in.
I've seen it in many cases. It was not effective.
Yes.
Because you cannot really judge people who are leaving. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I said. The leadership comes into role. So do they really appreciate the person leaving and the knowledge that they're taking away with them? And that follows on with the cultural issue.
Thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Very quick question and an invitation. Question, those construction organizations, whether they're public or private organizations, privately owned or publicly owned? Privately owned. It makes a big difference. So how do you manage knowledge? The invitation is that I would like to invite Dr. Suraj to, collaborate in this area, because I have done some work in educational buildings in Saudi Arabia, where the clients, we did similar study, and we find the difference between expat and non-expat.
Yes.
In terms of how they manage knowledge within the same Ministry of Higher Education that are responsible for project services. And it was very interesting, a huge difference between how expats see knowledge management and how the locals see it. So I'll look forward to working with you on this one.
Well, thank you very much. It's interesting to listen to you, and that was really close to what I'm also researching in the UK industry. But my question is, one of the problems with sharing knowledge, especially tacit knowledge, is the fear that my knowledge gives me power. And if I share my knowledge, like you said, I'm going to get sacked, there's a tendency that I can easily be replaced. What makes me relevant is the knowledge I possess. And if I give that knowledge to people, there's that fear, cultural fear, that I will lose my job. How do we manage this cultural personal fear in allowing our young people to share their knowledge?
I'm glad Charles is here. Charles,
and I just attempt to know that he's my PhD student, and she was my PhD student. Can I just say it's absolutely a very valid question. And too often there's a syndrome called knowledge is power syndrome.
Yes.
We want to turn that to what I call the increasing returns of knowledge, which means you share your knowledge with me, you haven't lost your knowledge, you make me a better person. I share my knowledge with you, I haven't lost my knowledge. You gain, and the more we share that knowledge, there's an increasing returns of knowledge. So you have to create a cultural awareness through things like coaching, not when they are leaving, as they enter in, through storytelling, through making sure that the meetings that are taking place are recorded very, very well. Too often when meetings are done, it's not recorded. So it's how you create a cultural incentive-based approach that allows people to know that everyone contributes and everyone's knowledge takes place. And an important way of doing that is to do knowledge mapping, to map out the activities you do, who are doing the activities, and overlay on top of those activities the key knowledge decision making where everybody contributes. So it's a cultural thing which you can engender in the organization. And we've had places where we've attempted doing it in the UK. So anybody who's really interested, with a little fee, I can tell them before.
Yes, I have just one last.
Yes.
Just one. I think knowledge management is an international issue, and that should be also considered in this aspect. That means there is nations in the world they are keeping knowledge, and most of the other nations, they are losing knowledge. I know it, for example, from my country, there is nations they are taking the gene knowledge from certain areas, and then they will sell it as seeds or something again. That is a point maybe to be considered in this aspect. The other issue, in the Gulf countries, we have a different demographic structure than Europe or other parts of the world. That means about retention, the knowledge, it's all of these who came to these countries working, someday they will leave because they are coming here to, to collect money and to work, and then they are dreaming to buy a house outside, and so on. I think this issue to be considered also in this demographic structure.
Yeah,
what do you think about it?
If you add to that, there are two sectors. One is in public sector, Saudi Arabia. Yesterday we presented that you can see the difference, what exactly you said. Within the public sector, the culture, the challenges are entirely different from trade construction because of nature of the industry. So we do recognize that.
And in terms of different nations, we are coming kind of spreading it out, and it's good to see that this knowledge is being recognized within the vision documents as a starting point. So they're starting to understand the importance of them, and especially with the GCC countries and how the people know about, if I may use that word. It is similar to the other countries due to globalization and the nature of the construction projects. It's temperamental. You work on a project and then it starts. So the knowledge that is created in the first place, how is that going to be shared, transferred, mapped, and in order to not do the mistakes that's been already done and learn lessons from that. And something that would be good to kind of start in the
It's all about improving performance, efficiency, right? Removing the waste in the system. So knowledge management is the best tool for that.
To check, is Dr. Hassan Ali here? Okay, so this is the last session. I would like to thank every single speaker to this morning. Fantastic topic. The audience, fantastic audience, Angel. It's very dynamic.
Fantastic
Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, let me very quickly introduce myself. My name is Asim Al-Haj. I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs at the and Development in the Applied Science University in Bahrain. Graduated from Beirut, and then I did my master and PhD in the UK. Did my master's at Heriot University and PhD at Dundee University, and then I worked with Robert Gordon University, and then traveled to Africa, to Nigeria, lived there for 6 years, working with the university, with Shell Petroleum, and also came back to Dubai, spent 9 years, and in 2015 I moved to Bahrain to join the university. Okay, we've got a total of, we've got 6 speakers this afternoon. We've got 10 minutes. Time is short. 10 minutes, strictly 10 minutes, and then 5 minutes for questions and answers. And I'll try to really monitor it very closely. Our first speaker is Dr. Khawla Shubar. Khawla Shubar is coming all the way from Iraq, from Kufa. She's assistant professor in civil engineering, highway transportation engineering. She's a lecturer in civil engineering department in the University of Kufa, Iraq, from 1996. Published 11 papers in traffic engineering, asphaltic materials, soil stabilization, and railways track. Dr. Khawla, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for contributing to this conference. The floor is yours. Thanks.
My research presentation about effect of repeated loading on mechanical behavior of truck ballast. My supervisor, Dr. Namir Khurshid Saudi, sharing with me by this work. As knowing in railway construction, granular protect places on the top layer of substructural bed. It should be capable to transforming high imposed pressure on sleeper ballast interaction. So the ballast is providing a frame and stable support with high bearing capacity. Economic construction is a main effectiveness in the selection of the ballast material for railway construction. So the location of Al-Qa'im Quarry, which is an Iraqi town situated in about 400 kilometers northwest Baghdad, or the capital of Iraq, represents the best cost